Hello, everybody. Welcome back here into this rebranded show, the Dead Air Film Podcast. That is after much deliberation, the name that we have come to. I guess we can briefly talk about it, like here, just kind of what we're planning to do with this. So moving away, also Trevor, joined by Thomas as always. So we've decided to move generally away from like explicitly Oscar-centric content. I am over, if you would like to hear me yap about awards, I am over on Oscar Film Forecast with our friends Jack and Anthony, talking there on occasion. But just given like time commitments, like we are both full-time college students, who are working on many a creative project as well, within film and theater, and between scheduling everything like that, it's harder for us to keep up with the awards race as consistently, and we found that we were having more fun just talking about films, and reviewing, discussing, having more long form discussion about both contemporary and older cinema. So we decided to relaunch sort of as a podcast structured around that, weekly, sometimes 2 in a week, discussions around films that are coming out now. So we are doing films that are prevalent within the award season right now. And then we'll move into some reflections on older films, other films coming out throughout the year. And yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be fun. It'll be fun, and you'll have us consistently.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, excited to get into this kind of slate of that kind of come out at the end of every year. And I think this year had I think it was broadly quite a decent year for
We
film.
closed strong. It was
Exactly, we
worrying
closed strong, and so excited to get into all of them, starting today with Marty Supreme.
It's Marty Supreme. It's Marty Supreme. It's Marty Supreme. Yeah. I really, the more I've sat with the film, the more I really, really love it.
I completely agree. I think
I've
the more I've sat with it, I may be tempted to call it my favorite of the year.
Ooh, bold.
Yes, bold statements to start off this new era of
Yeah, no, I think that's fair though. I wouldn't quite go that far, but I've seen it twice now. And I appreciate it even more the second time around. It's just such a whirlwind. And we talked about this before, like after we first both seen it, but like it feels like a hurricane, right? The entire film, it feels like a hurricane with Chalamet at the epicenter of it. And it feels like we're constantly spinning and swirling, and there's like we're surrounded by chaos. But I think this is partially due to Chalamet and partially due to Safdie, who's just such a brilliant like guiding hand throughout the entire film. Sort of, holding your hand, helping you, making sure you still, like are grasping what's going on, but willing to push you, just a little bit into the storm every once in a while before pulling you back into the middle, where you're grounded by Chalamet's performance. And I think it's the best Safdie film. I mean, it is certainly just, Uncut Gems was Good Time with a bigger budget and bigger ideas, and this is Uncut Gems with a bigger budget and bigger ideas, like formally and stylistically. But I think it delivers on being bigger and better within those concepts and within that form.
I think the punch that Uncut Gems gave me means I am reticent to put it above that just yet. I need to kind of linger with a bit more time. But yeah, it's doing exactly those kind of things, but as you say, with a bigger scale and with a potentially even more well-realized perspective at its core. I think that's what we were saying about that kind of Eye of the Storm. There is an anchor to this film that is so strong, and that is both Chalamet's performance and just the character itself of this Marty Supreme entity. It feels like a film character that's existed forever, an amalgamation of all these different kind of influences. But
it feels literary. Like this feels like watching a classic American novel.
Absolutely. I think the Marty Supreme at its core, like the name, the character, the face, it all just culminates together. And even looking at things external to the film, like marketing that prep you for this world you're about to go in, it's just the
self-performance of Chalamet over the past couple of years,
exactly. It's like
culturally as this figure.
Where's the character? Where's the person? And it's such a good project, I think, for that kind of odd mashing up of ideas and odd kind of the real world intersecting with. I think this is the kind of perfect project to experience that in.
Yeah, 100%. And it feels like something that film needed, as cliche as that sounded, like something like this and an event like this for a a director, like I wouldn't call this auteur driven, but like it's this isn't like a studio thing. This isn't a franchise thing. It isn't relying on IP. Like, yes, it's based on the real life story of Marty Mouse is the character name. I can't remember. Marty Reisman, something like that.
Yeah, Reisman, I think.
Reisman, yeah. But like nobody's like there aren't Marty Reisman fans out there that are like hyped about the Marty Reisman IP. Like this is I would call it an original film.
Yeah,
And
and even
having it
that
be
kind of
this much of an
matching
event.
up. Yeah, even that kind of matching up, it also goes of casting and like things like
Yeah.
Kevin O'Leary being in the film and as that character.
Yeah.
It's all perfectly kind of driven to be this vehicle that you just get completely swept up in because everything
It's a
down to that
moment.
casting, a
It's a
lot of it
cultural
is so
moment.
believable and so grounded. But yeah, it's also has a film. It's a film with such energy that I think is also something that is needed. It just felt like it has injected something into the zeitgeist. This film,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think it's our generation's Wolf of Wall Street in a lot of ways. Like I think the Marty Mauser character will be remembered like a Jordan Belfort and will be misconstrued and misinterpreted like a Jordan Belfort. Like
yeah.
we're gonna get so many like TikTok edits of like the grind set and like the like yeah like the hustle grind set thing and the same thing that we see with like Patrick Bateman, right? Like um I think Marty Mauser is totally gonna become that, and I think like as frustrating as it is to see like these critiques and deconstructions of like the male viscera and masculinity and masculine ego within American culture, like misconstrued as positive things. I think it's like good for our generation to have one of those and to have one of those figures that is, really compelling and interesting, but has been misconstrued. Like it feels like a rite of passage almost.
Potentially, and I do think the film actually goes enough of the way where those readings of Marty as purely a hero are kind of
Yeah.
averted. I think the fact that
That's
you
fair.
never really see Marty ever exist in the splendor that he'd like to present himself in,
Hmm.
it's all a fraud and a facade when he does. When he's in the hotel, you know, hooking up with Gwyneth Paltrow. It's all presented as fake and a facade. So I think the film does go enough of a way to prevent those readings
It's
as
almost like a
well in quite a
postmodern
shrewd
deconstruction
way.
of
Mm.
films like that.
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%.
Which makes it feel, again, like it gives it this air of being so classic, while also feeling very contemporary and feel like it's in conversation with those things at the same time. Like it manages to feel like they don't make them like they used to, but also not feel tired, which I think is
Yeah,
such an impressive line to strike.
yes. And
Within
be
film.
a critique of that kind of hustle culture, that kind of
Yeah.
grind mindset, whilst not kind of completely condemning it and showing that there is potentially, some value in it. It's a film that seems like it's in conversation with itself as much as it
Yeah.
is in
Well, because
conversation
I
with
do think that there's value. Like I find this within myself, like having just complete confidence, like backing yourself,
Mm,
right? Like I do think that there is something relatable. I think particularly like the ego of uh you know Western men, I think are allowed to do that a lot. And I'm I think certainly one of them. But like I with a lot of things like within film, right? I have confidence that I'm going to succeed within it. And I think that I don't know. I think it's nice to give that a voice while critiquing it and deconstructing it at the same time.
mm.
Like I think it's a more I would call this like a more well realized film than something like a Wolf of Wall Street even.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. I also think what is so carefully done and carefully balanced in this is that it comes to you with as this kind of individualized perspective, and he's such a well-rounded character, Marty. But there are also these universal aspects to him that anyone can project
Right.
elements of themselves onto, and it's a very difficult balance to strike that I think is achieved perfectly in this film.
Yeah. I also think in the way that it gets into like the masculine mind and viscera and paranoia about all these sorts of things, and obviously there's many things that it says within that lens about like life and death and that cycle, which we can talk about with birth. But I also think it's really interesting how steeped in the 80s this film feels, because like it takes place in the 1950s, but the soundtrack is so 80s driven, and I think that like thematically it feels like one of those like 80s American exceptionalist sports films, but a deconstruction of it with how it presents its ending, and I think it relates back to the 50s really nicely. and the way that it explores like post World War II Milia and like how Chalamet's character Marty Mauser, how he exists as a Jewish American post World War II, and how he kind of processes that trauma through very very funny jokes within the film, but also like American relations with Japan, and I think that filtering that through this very 80s lens explicitly with the way that its narrative is told and with the soundtrack, and how much American politics in the 80s related to the 50s, and like Reagan era conservatism was so much about like returning to the idealism of the 50s, and how sort of the form of the film represents the 80s desire to come back to the 50s, but then the text of it is representing just how dirty and grimy the 50s were, can kind of I know. I think that works on its own level in the way, again, as you say, it's in conversation with itself, and it's discussing like what these eras of America mean and how they're in conversation with each other.
Yeah, and I think it's also a film about running away from those contexts
Mhm.
in another really kind of interesting way. That Marty as a character is someone who keeps denying it and throwing it off in kind of the past, and belittling other people who seem to
Yeah,
have psychological effects from it. In the same way that it almost feels like it's running away from its 50s context, it feels like a film that's timeless, and that all reflects then back onto Marty's journey and his dream
yeah,
of becoming something timeless, something that isn't bound by eras or
yeah,
the psychological effects of previous generations, etc. And so that kind of journey and that dream that Marty has is so cleverly kind of reflected back into the narrative of the film and in the way it's presented as this, as you say, frenetic kind of 80s coke fueled
yeah.
piece, but set in the
Very
context
like
of
After Hours, like Scorsese, and yeah,
Mm, It feels like it's a film that wants to break out of its context at all times.
yeah. But is like willfully trapped by it, I think, in the
Yeah,
same way.
yeah.
And yeah, I really like what you said about it feeling timeless, because again, I think that all of that is what makes it so relatable, I think, for people today. Like in you can still find something. It really does not feel like a period piece, but
Mm.
I don't think that the themes of the film could exist without it being set in that period, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely,
So
absolutely. I think going back to your idea of it being a kind of a take on a sports exceptionalist film, I think as well that's another really interesting aspect about it. The way it kind of subverts traditional sports film elements. So when we get to the conclusion, I mean, spoilers. I think we've said that already.
yeah, I mean, this is a spoiler analysis we're
We may
talking.
not have done, but the
Yeah,
film's been out long enough. You should have seen it. But the fact that by the time we get to the end, most sports films operate on a few different levels. You can either have the external stakes being the main thing, winning this match is somehow the most meaningful thing,
yeah,
and that's how the film is presenting it. You can have really good sports films that do it, where the kind of external stakes and internal stakes are balanced, where the big event, the kind of main thing at the end, the thing that the film is building towards, is just as important to the character as well as kind of the world around it. This film pushes that to its logical extreme, where by the end the external stakes are minuscule. They're
yeah.
non-important. No one cares, and you get that excellent shot of him after he's won. You get that shot of the crowd and just no one really
Nobody
reacting. I
gave a
think
fuck.
that is the
Even
most
the American soldiers are like
yeah.
almost performatively cheering
Yeah,
during the
I
final
think that
sequence.
is the most powerful shot of the film, is that cut to the crowd after
Hmm.
Marty's
After
comes
he's
out
fallen down,
victorious.
yeah,
And it's that all those internal stakes, that is the important thing, and that is again the thing that the film is so good at doing, is grounding it in character. And I think that's a really interesting subversion of traditional sports genres and narratives, is that it grounds it all in the character, and essentially the sport itself is meaningless. Ping pong is a backdrop in this film in a way
yeah.
that I wasn't necessarily expecting, but actually I'm kind of here for it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I thought we were gonna see so many orange ping pong balls, but they're
Yep, yep,
like
yeah.
barely in the film, right?
I
And
thought we'd
and I
have a
think
lot more kind of shots of them trying to make ping pong look cool. I was saying before the film, you can make tennis look cool. You can't really make ping pong look
okay,
cool.
the one show, the in the semifinals towards the opening when he plays the I can't remember the character name, but the guy who like survived the Holocaust.
Yes, yes.
And when they do like the show point where they're just like fucking around, that was really fun.
Kletsky.
Kletsky, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, that was fun, but that was fun in the same way the Harlem Globetrotters that came out.
Sure,
That
sure.
was that was kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But yeah, I to go back to what you're saying about like externality versus internality, I think that you can even look at sort of the contrast between the external and internal just within the character of Marty himself.
Mm,
Because he's a character driven solely by his own idea of what success is, right?
mm,
Like he has this very specific idea of what success is, and he keeps on saying about, oh, is I have to achieve everything by myself. I have to achieve everything by himself. And he so clearly isn't, right? And you can watch him like modify in real time multiple times in the film like what success actually is, and it's this constantly changing thing because he's so like terrified of the feeling of failure that he would rather succeed after shifting the goalposts 10 times than in his head fail, right?
mm,
And I think it's so fascinating how internally motivated he is, despite being such an external showman. Like
mm,
he feels like such a performer and so willing to like indulge in the externality and the showmanship of the sport, and like he wants to be on the cover of the Wheaties box. He wants to have these orange belt, right? But everything that he actually wants is all internal, which is, as
mm,
you said, I think how the film is able to push the sports film to its logical conclusion with that ending sequence, because it is actually the internal moments. Like
yeah,
it wouldn't make sense for the character of Marty to have won, if he got to go compete in the tournament at the end, and if he won that, like that wouldn't, because then you would just want more,
yeah.
like it has to be internal. And I think that it's so fun to watch this character who's essentially this walking contradiction between their own
Mm.
internality and their externality, and that like push and pull between his internal understanding of himself and how he wants people to understand him externally.
Yeah, and I think reducing the external stakes progressively over the course of the film, whilst increasing the internal stakes for him, and that kind of he's getting further and further away from his goal.
Yeah,
It that becomes a really interesting tension that is played throughout. I find it really. I was very happy the fact that it kind of moves away from him wanting to be the next American superstar, like
yeah,
wanting to be on that Wheaties box. It moves those kind of things that are in the trailer actually only occupy maybe the first 10
right,
minutes of the film, um, because that isn't a realistic goal, and that kind of success is always going to be a facade and always going to be an unobtainable,
yeah,
unrealistic goal, I think, for a film to try and push him towards achieving. And so repeatedly decreasing those stakes and actually reframing that success to be something more personal, more grounded, and less based in this kind of, as you say, the showmanship aspect and him wanting to be famous for lack of better words. Like
yeah.
that is really where I think the tension of the film lies, and is really kind of why you are encouraged to keep rooting for Martin, because everything suddenly feels a bit more achievable when the stakes are lowered, and then
Yeah.
you get pushed further and further back, and but it still feels achievable. There's something very tantalizing about the film
It's so like
and
it's
energy.
narrowing the entire film, right? It
Mm,
feels like we start with such this like wide breadth of possibilities,
mm,
and the entire film, like it almost feels claustrophobic, right? And the way that
mm,
it's like slowly narrowing and narrowing until we arrive at what was I feel like obviously always going to be the end point of this character, but you
mm.
don't realize that it was obvious until the end.
Yeah.
But in the way that it sort of like slowly closes that window on you. Um, Also, so you mentioned tennis, and you
Mm,
mentioned, how it uses ping pong as a backdrop. I think relating this to challengers, I'm really enjoying this, like, modern, or not modern, but, like, contemporary postmodern, like, sort of sports film where it's using the sport as a backdrop to, like, metaphorically explore something else. And I think it's interesting, it's time that we've sort of had this sports revitalization. Like, I think that Challengers is such a like, Challengers isn't a film about tennis. It's a
mm.
film about relationships that use tennis as an allegory to explore a relationship.
Yeah.
And like there is a lot about like sports psychology within there as well, and there is here within Marty as well. But I would say broadly, there are films that use sport as a thematic tool, which I love. Like I love sports. I feel very romantic towards sports. I mean, I think that like baseball has really been the only sport that has been captured in like a truly romantic way consistently within film. But I'm hoping that we see, because like we haven't had that many sports films, really that have been like big moments, I guess. Like it feels like they used to be. So it's been nice seeing that revitalization with Challengers, with Marty Supreme. Um, Ethos is more directly about baseball, but it's still exploring, and that obviously was not nearly as big of a film as Challengers and Marty Supreme. But I think Ethos is another great example of like sort of the place of modern sports films.
Mm.
And it's I don't know. I'm a fan of sports on film, and I hope that this is a sign of positive things to come for more films.
Yeah, and actually it's interesting because it is easier, I think, to capture it on film when it is such an individualized sport. We've talked before about how
Yeah,
there are no football or soccer.
soccer.
Hate saying that. Why there are no good kind of films that really present that, and that's because it's more of a team sport, and film is an inherently kind of individualized
Yeah.
medium that explores individuals, and so it's easier to achieve that effect when you're talking about
I
a
mean,
thing like
both footballs, to be honest, like American
yeah.
football is, I think, so hard to like make compelling. Like, I think it's so much easier to make a sports comedy than a sports drama, because I think
Mm,
comedy there's so many other ways, and I think it's like to explore film beyond the sport. I think it's much easier to use sport as a backdrop within a comedy,
mm,
and you can be a lot dumber, I guess, and write a good sports comedy than you have to be to like it requires less thought than a good sports drama, right?
yeah.
And I think that yeah, like even like basketball and hockey, like you have Miracle for hockey, but like there's just so significantly less. And I think why baseball works so well is because baseball is a sport, even though it's a team sport, it's built
It
around
is.
individual battles.
Yeah.
And like it's also I think that the like just the visuals of how sport is presented on TV infers a lot. Like football, basketball, and hockey are all like one-dimensional. Both footballs, basketball, hockey, they're all one-dimensional. They operate on side to side.
Mm,
Whereas something like baseball has so many different like levels. Like it's a weird looking field, right? And it's you have going from home to first, from first to second. Like it's all of these individual moments that are not just going from one side to another. And these individual battles and showdowns, like every battle between a pitcher and a batter is like a classic Western showdown, right? So I don't know. I think yeah, like the sport film in general, I think really fascinates me and why it works for some sports and doesn't for others. But yeah, I think definitely individual sports lends itself more to both how it's portrayed, but also like the psychology of it.
mm.
So I know I'm curious to see where we go further, because I think that having this and Challengers back to back is certainly going to inspire more filmmakers to take on sports films. Uh,
Absolutely. I think what they both do very well is a lot of sports films tend to have the third act is kind of the third act is the event. It's the
mhm,
match. And this film, it layers so many stakes on, whereas like the actual 21 point game that they're playing is really quite a short amount of time
yeah,
compared to the rest of the film. And it means what you can do is you can then pack that punch, the emotional punch you're trying to hit with whatever happens when that event ends and the event itself. You can pack them a lot tighter and closer together, which also makes kind of this and tennis and baseball in many ways very different from kind of
yeah,
sports of 90, 100 minutes, because it's harder to make that the emotional punch and the actual conclusion are like it's harder to put those as close together as you can do
yeah.
with this, which means that the emotional punch at the end of this film is really striking and really does
Very
it's
visceral.
very visceral.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I want to talk about the ending, but first I want to touch on some of the performances,
Mm,
which I think are, what like the Chalamet performance is what is being talked about, right? It is
mm,
the thing for the film. And we've talked about him a little bit, but like Jesus Christ, like he was understandably talking to shit. Um, because yeah, it's so just the word I keep coming back to is like electric,
mm,
intoxicating. Like he I think really just embodies energy. Like you're waiting on every word that he says, every action to like it's exciting. It's exciting. It feels like watching an unpredictable live wire, right?
mm,
But he is so well fleshed out and grounded in the same time. There's so many fun moments where like I think about, again, spoilers, but when he is going up to get the necklace from the Gwyneth Paltrow character, right? And she's just got her bad reviews, and she goes away is crying, and the camera tracks his face, and you like can see him processing how he needs to reframe and restructure and alter his course of action in real time as he's walking down that staircase before arriving to the Kevin O'Leary character. And
Mm.
I think it's in those moments when it's so fun when you can like see him thinking on his feet.
Yeah.
That really make the character such like an unpredictable, exciting like beast.
Yeah, and I think that is what makes this character tick and his performance tick, is that there is that sense of unpredictability with him, and that's not that he's not a well-rounded character who could just do anything at any point in time. It's that the film pushes that character and breaks him down constantly, where he's constantly revealing new aspects about himself, and that's what gives that performance, and that's what gives the character that unpredictability. And I think you're right. I think because the film stays with him for so long and gives moments of rest and those kind of briefer moments of pause where you can see the cogs ticking in his brain, I think that's what is really key to making him this so realized character, is because you get those moments of pause and because you're spending so long with him. And we touched on this when we talked off screen, but I think there's
Yeah.
a one element of this film that doesn't quite work, and that's when you lose his perspective. It's when you go to the Rachel's character,
Yes. That's a
and it's kind of her with the dog, and exploring that plot, which makes sense narratively, and you needed a way of doing that and incorporating that into the plot, but you lose Timmy's energy, and so therefore something about that scene does feel off. Something about it feels wrong. Something about it feels not quite right.
yeah.
And you mentioned it's because you're being launched into this chaos without that anchor. You're just being thrown into, and actually then you stop and realize, actually this film is crazy. Why are they? What is this
Why
dog
is she
plot? That's
found
insane.
a dog dealer to get a dog that looks similar so
Yeah,
that way she can try and sell like get money as a reward that she proposed
yeah.
$2,000 for this dog that isn't the actual dog, so that way she can then give the money to Timothée Chalamet's character so that we can go to Japan and play ping pong. Like what the fuck? But
Suddenly
yeah,
you're taken out of that perspective, and you're like, it doesn't track.
yeah,
But that's not
and
a
like
fault of the
again,
film. I think that's a fault of losing that perspective and losing
yeah.
Marty's kind of narrative voice.
And you can call that a choice, but you can also justify most things as a choice, right? Like
Mm,
I agree. I think it feels off, and I feel like that's the point where like maybe the film gets slightly too overbloated in all of its narratives and the A and B and C and D and E
mm.
plots that the film has, right? Like I think at the point where we do, because I think that's the only scene that Chalamet isn't in.
Yeah, yeah.
And unless we're just completely forgetting something, I'm pretty positive that's the only scene that Chalamet isn't in when she tries to trick him into getting the other dog, the fake Moses. Um, and yeah, I think it reveals how
Well,
bloated it is.
actually, now thinking about, there is another scene where Rachel goes to her husband, and the husband starts
Oh,
freaking out.
true, true.
There is
Yeah,
that scene, which it doesn't quite have the same effect of feeling off, but I think the point still stands.
right. Yeah, yeah. I do think the film is lesser when it doesn't have Chalamet at the center of it.
Mm,
But that isn't to say though that like Odessa Zion, great. Uh,
yeah.
like she's such a wonderful discovery out of this. I think that she has the perfect energy for this film. It's a very like striking performance. In that I think it doesn't work in a lot of films. It's just like a big character. That as a supporting player, I don't think you normally want your like in a film that is such a character study. You usually
Mm.
don't want your supporting players to be that big of personalities, but I think it works just because of how big Marty is, that she is allowed to sort of like also be this massive character and also kind of like poke and prod and push with them.
Yes, and I
Be
think it
be
works because as
deceitful of
well,
her own with the eye.
everyone, it's not just like everyone is a big performance. Everyone is
Yeah,
giving a sort of, it's not over the top, but it's filtered through Marty's kind of vision, and there is that kind of sense of an unreliable narrator, I think, to Marty, that's never especially vocalized. It's never kind of touched upon, but I do think it is there and it exists.
yeah. We exist
Um,
in myopia in a lot of ways.
Yes, yeah, and I think Tyler Creator is another one who delivers a fantastic
Yeah,
performance, and kind of enters the narrative at exactly the right moment, just to kind of keep it fresh, keep it novel, and then exits it at exactly the right time, because there is this sense of characters just falling away from Marty and falling away from the narrative. I don't think there aren't loose ends that needed tidying up here. I can see why people may throw that criticism at it. There's a lot of kind of loose ends and a lot of bits and pieces that kind of just go off. But I think that is, again, tracing back to Marty's perspective.
Yeah. He
That is
sees
how Marty.
people as disposable in a lot of ways.
Yes, as how can I use them at this direct moment?
Yeah, exactly, and that's exactly what happened with the Tyler, the Creator character. Like,
Mm,
he entered the story when he was useful, and he exited the story when he was no longer useful.
yeah.
And I think the one character that I think is the most compelling of the supporting characters that does kind of persist throughout the narrative is Gwyneth Paltrow as Kay. I think that she not only is it, like, wonderfully, like, meta reflexive as sort of being her comeback. I thought it was
Mm.
originally offered to Julia Roberts, and then she dropped out for
Oh,
After the Hunt,
interesting.
which is
Interesting.
interesting. But, yeah, I think it's really fun in that way. But I also think that, like, she's a character that has, like, quote unquote "made it" within the
Mm,
American dream, right? And she's made it as a performer. I think that Chalamet, he introduced himself as a I keep saying Chalamet, Marty. He introduced himself as a performer to her, and I think he sees himself as a performer, which goes back to that sort of contradiction, externality, and internality, right? But, I think that she is the only character that I think is consistently able to sort of, like, keep him on his toes and poke and prod him, and almost seems as his equal, because I think he sees Rachel and, like, the Tyler, the Creator character as less than, and I think within the power structure, Kevin O'Leary's character is greater than.
mm,
And I think that Kay sort of operates as, like, she was once famous, but she's on the other side of the hump. Like, he hasn't gotten there yet, and she's been there, done that, and is
mm,
now sort of falling back down to his level as this, she's the wife of this wealthy man who is only having her play funded because of him and only has people in the audience because of him. Like, she's sort of, you know, only living her life through this man that she hates in a lot of ways. So I love their dynamic. I think it's really, really compelling.
Yes, and I think it serves as a nice critique as when I do think Marty does see this when he kind of she goes off with the reviews and kind of he loses that next exchange. He kind of
Mhm.
I think that moment that we mentioned earlier of him kind of clocking in the cold stone, I think he realizes that even though that's not ideal, he still wants that. And it's
Yeah.
that kind of insatiable thing that is critiqued throughout the film, because then he goes to Kevin O'Leary's
Yeah.
character and then he is
Gets
trying to do
spanked
the
on the ass.
exact
Yeah.
same thing as she is in. And that I think kind of critique of that insatiable appetite that even though he's seen the effects of it, he's almost been arrested by the police, etc., etc., he still craves that his conception of success. So I do think she is another really nice element to kind of tie it all together and then push and pull at Marty's character. I think there's something really nice that comes with age in this film, as the older characters feel like they know more, which
Yeah.
should be something that's obvious to say, but actually a lot of films don't have that aspect. And there is a young, youthful energy to this film that Gwyneth Paltrow breaks whenever she comes
Yeah.
on screen. I think that is such just a small touch of having these worldlier characters around Marty to also again ground him more in reality.
Yeah. No,
There's almost
100%.
two worlds existing in this film in a really fascinating way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think the last main performance to touch on is Kevin O'Leary,
Mm.
who is just playing himself.
He's just playing himself. Yeah,
And it's
exactly.
great. And it's great.
Exactly.
Like, he's so fun. I love that he improv'd the vampire line that
Mm.
I was born in 1601. I'm a vampire.
Yeah.
Um, fantastic. Fantastic. Like, it just you can just feel him. And I think also the way so many of these performances are kind of meta, like, it plays with the actor's real life
Mm.
persona. We talked about with Chalamet how he sort of had this, like, self performance as Marty among his press tour, right? I think the Gwyneth Paltrow character, it's a very meta reflexive of, like, where she's at in her career and, like, wanting that comeback. And this film is supposed to be what that play, was supposed to be for Kay, right?
Mm.
And then you have Kevin O'Leary, who's literally just playing himself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Tyler the Creator as well is, like, also playing himself in a lot of ways.
Mm.
So I
Which
think it's
obviously is hard to do.
right.
It's not innocent,
Yeah,
but
that wasn't said as a slight.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I think it's, in a lot of ways, the hardest person to play is yourself,
Mm.
right? Yeah, no, thank you for the clarification. Not
But
meant as a slight
yes,
at
yes.
all. I
The
think they're
point
all
still stands.
wonderful, and I think it really works that it is very meta, I think, a lot of those performances. And again, for a film that is a period piece, both I think for the 80s, like, and the 50s in a lot of ways, I
Mm.
think that does help tie it to now and give it that timeless feeling, how connected the characters are to, like, real life, you know,
Mm.
personas of its performers.
Yeah, I think this is the best example of casting. Like, yes, you can point to a film like One Battle After Another and say they found Chase Infinity and Sean Penn, just an
Mhm.
incredible generational piece of casting for that character. But I think the world that is created with this cast and the fact that they all, as we say, link to our preconceptions of them is just astonishing.
Genius.
Astonishing.
Like, if this it's not gonna win the best casting Oscar, but it
It
should.
should. Yeah, it should.
It's, like, just obviously the best casting of the year, I think.
Mm.
So, yeah, no, lovely all around. The ending, so we argued about this before, and I've seen it again since then. I was initially on the train of, a bit more cynical, a bit more cynicism with the ending, perceiving Marty and, again, spoilers, obviously, if you're still,
Mm.
still have not clicked off, but Marty having the child and seeing his kid and, yeah, I initially read it more cynically and thinking that, he's gonna leave and he's crying because he's gonna leave, but I do think that I think in the way that it plays with, again, the masculine ego and the male, Western American mind, and this, like, drive for success and how it's ends up being so grounded, I think, in humanity
Mm.
by the end and just, like, the power of the cycle of birth, I think is really what the film is kind of about, and I read it with a lot more optimistic lens, I think, on the second time around, especially just how directly the opening scene and closing scene tie.
Yeah, I think the film itself is a kind of positive arc and journey in the end, and that is there are different readings you can take, and that is one thing that makes this film so complex and so
Yeah,
interesting. But I think it becomes a film about maturity when you start adding this kind of the baby into the mix. I think that the film it's trying to do and it's trying to show that Marty is a character that pushes people away and is constantly on the move and is constantly on the run, and the kid provides stability and grounding, and become someone he can't just use and abuse and throw away because he
mhm,
has to then become someone who is almost not. I'm not saying children abuse their parents, but
yeah,
children need to use their parents,
yeah,
and so Marty needs to realize this and he needs to become that for someone else, and that is what to me that broke down that kind of breakdown at the end suggested was his kind of revelation, that actually he can't just keep moving and he needs something to ground him, and that baby becomes that for him. I think after the credits, who knows what he would have done, and that's what's interesting. But I choose to read the film as one of a positive growth, and he will actually kind of tone down his success and tone down his delusions of grandeur, and
yeah,
actually he's realized that he needs something stable, and that baby is showing that. Whether the breakdown is him realizing that or him kind of reluctantly accepting it,
yeah,
that's another question. Whether the breakdown is him going, well, fuck, I have to now give up on these solutions. And potentially, I do think if we trace the character arc, that is where the character is always going to end, and that is the journey he is going on.
mhm,
But yeah.
yeah. I think that there's also that what I think changed my perspective was sort of his interaction with the Kevin O'Leary character, in Japan, at the ping
Mm,
pong match when he decides, like, that, yeah, he's not even gonna get paid for the event. He's fully accepted that he's not competing in the tournament, and he tells, him exactly what he's gonna do, and Kevin O'Leary's like, "Do you really think it's that simple?" And so he's like, "Yeah, I do think it is." And I think that's where he almost finally becomes level with himself
mm,
and becomes like brings himself down, I think, in a lot of ways, which is why he cares so much about that match and
mm,
is so overwhelmed by that match because I don't think that Marty of, a few weeks ago would have actually cared about that match. I think he would have just been pissed about not being able to
mm.
enter the tournament. So I do think that that's a very, like, pivotal point where he does, bring himself down a level. And yeah, on the ending with it being optimistic, I I think I was initially, like, placing the cynicism of the Safdie's previous work, especially because I do think Uncut Gems is a very cynical film.
I do. Yes, I
And
completely
I
agree.
think that you can read Marty Supreme with the same cynicism, but I do think that it's trying to do something different, even though it's formally presenting itself in a very similar way to Uncut Gems.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that it places all of the kind of his change in this, and this is what allows us to have this debate, and this is what is so interesting about him as
Yeah.
a character, is that all the things that cause him to change are kind of external to him. He can't change
Yeah.
these facts. He is having that kid. He can't play in the tournament as much as he might try and come up with a scheme. And I think his revelation that he's not going to play in the tournament, a previous Marty who hadn't undergone this journey may have come up with this new scheme to get involved, and that would have demonstrated that actually he hadn't changed.
Yeah.
But instead, it's more of an acceptance of a fate, and that kind of the end of the match is the culmination of that. It feels like to him, he's cutting off and he's ready to then move on. And I think the baby is just a really good visual metaphor and visual shorthand for that need
And
to
that's all
move
babies
on.
are, visual metaphors.
Exactly. And so it's kind of perfect at showcasing that change physically.
Yes. I really think, to go back to the conversation we had earlier about internal and external, right? I think that ending is like the bringing those together. Like, it's finally taking the contradiction of his internality and externality and finally marrying them, and he's becoming like whole with his external, like how he wants people to externally perceive him and who he is internally, finally become one thing. Like, he self-actualizes.
Yeah, and there's so much, and this is what is also really good. There's so much unsaid and unknown about the character still. Like, will he be a good father? That's another kind of layer that would have needed to be broken down, and that's what the film is constantly doing. It's breaking down these layers of Marty and revealing new aspects, and it's a film that definitely leaves you wanting more. I'm not suggesting make a sequel. I'm just saying that it's
Marty
that
Supreme.
that's part of the joy of the film, is that you want to know what keeps happening after the credits. You want to keep following him. That, I think, to me, is a sign that the film was a success. Is because you're still craving more Marty and to follow his journey further.
Yeah. Yes. 100%. 100%. So, yeah. Do we have anything else to say? Any other?
I think we touched on pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I had.
Too. Do we want to throw a rating at it?
I would be happy giving it a 10. I'd be happy giving it 10.
10? Wow, we're kicking it off with a 10.
I think there are holes you can poke at it, but I don't think these holes are reducing the overall impact of the film. Yeah, I was astounded and blown away by kind of every second this wild ride took me on.
Yeah, that's fair. I was at an 8, I think, initially, but I think the more after seeing it again, talking with more people in this conversation as well, I think I'm up to like a low to medium 9 on it. It isn't, like I said, it isn't quite my best of the year. It's probably somewhere in like the 7 or 8 range on my year list, but I think it would take some pretty strong films to knock it out of my top 10. So,
sure.
Well, there we are. Episode 1 of the Dead Air Film Podcast in the books. Hopefully you did not find this to be dead air and found it to be quite alive and enjoyable air coming into your ears.
Let's not use the phrase "coming into your ears."
Let's
not end on that note.
What's the point of podcasting if not to come into our audience's ears?
I suppose so. I suppose that's a cynical view.
When they clicked on the video, they said,
"Yeah, a cynical view of podcasting," but a valid interpretation
with wonderful air. Yeah. Well, anyways, those are our thoughts on Marty Supreme. Hope you enjoyed this new look for us. I think it'll be fun. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with just yapping and doing more of this, and doing some more in-depth analysis of some of the year's best and worst films over the next couple of weeks leading up to the Oscars. So we will see you guys soon. Thank you for watching. Links to our letterbox will be in the description if you would like to follow us over there. And until next time.
That's my favorite part of every episode.
When you just you look forward to it. You get so excited. Did you miss it? Yeah. But until next time, thank you for watching. Stay safe.